Okay, picture this. It is the year 1301 AD. We're in Cranganore on the lush tropical coast of South India.
Right.
The port city, it's buzzing with trade, but we are ducking away from all that noise, stepping inside the cool, dim interior of the Church of Markuriakos.
Mm-hmm.
Inside, sitting by what you have to assume is just flickering candlelight, is a scribe. He's hunched over, meticulously copying a holy text. But here's the catch. This isn't some elderly monk with a long white beard.
No.
It's a 14-year-old boy.
Which is frankly terrifying when you consider the discipline required for that. I mean, I don't know many 14-year-olds who can sit still for 10 minutes, let alone, months of copying.
Exactly. I was barely managing my homework at that age. And this kid is creating what will become one of the most vital historical documents for understanding the history of Christianity in India.
A huge one.
Welcome back to the Deep Dive. Today, we aren't just looking at old paper. We're trying to reconstruct a lost world. We're talking about the Nazranis, the St. Thomas Christians, and we're analyzing two artifacts, MS Vatican Syriac 22 and MS Vatican Syriac 17.
And these are not just dusty books on a shelf. You should think of them as time capsules. They're the most well-known Syriac manuscripts copied in South India, and they give us this incredibly precise, almost high-definition snapshot of the culture, the hierarchy, and the international connections of Indian Christians centuries before European colonization really took over the whole narrative.
It's like finding a message in a bottle, but the message is hundreds of pages long and written.
In ancient Syriac, yeah.
In ancient Syriac. So let's unpack this. We had to start with the boy, the 14-year-old. He's the one who creates MS Vatican Syriac 22.
Right. This is the oldest known Syriac manuscript from India. It was completed, like you said, in 1301 AD. And the colophon, that's the scribe's note at the very end of the book, it tells us it was written specifically in the Church of Markuriakos in Cranganore.
And we actually have his full name, don't we? It's not anonymous.
No, not at all. He wanted his lineage known. His name was Zachariah, Joseph Bar Zachariah.
Zachariah, a 14-year-old deacon. What I love about this is the personality that just bleeds through the ink. Usually historical documents can feel so detached.
So formal, yeah.
But Zachariah leaves this note where he sounds like a teenager. He is incredibly apologetic. He's basically saying, I'm so sorry about my handwriting. I'm sorry about my knowledge of the language. Please forgive me.
It's such a human moment. It's the 14th century equivalent of imposter syndrome. He's clearly intimidated by the task. But here's the irony. Scholars who've analyzed the text, they all point out that his command of the Syriac language was actually exceptional.
He was just being humble.
Humble, or, perhaps just holding himself to an impossibly high standard. He wasn't just scribbling. He was writing in a Strangelo script.
Okay, we should pause on that. What exactly is a Strangelo? Is that just like a font?
That's a good way to think about it. Think of it as the difference between, say, handwriting a grocery list and doing formal calligraphy for a royal wedding invitation.
Oh.
A Strangelo is the oldest, most formal, sort of monumental form of Syriac script. It's majestic.
Yeah.
For a 14-year-old to execute that with precision is a sign of some really intense training.
So we have this humble overachiever.
Yeah.
Now, what was he actually writing? What is the content of this book?
It's a lectionary of Pauline epistles. So these are readings from the letters of St. Paul arranged for the church calendar, and he's using the Peshitta version. That's the standard ancient Syriac Bible. But if you look past the scripture itself, the way the book is organized tells us so much about their daily anxieties.
This is where it gets really interesting for me. It wasn't just, here are the readings for Sunday Mass. The list of intentions, the specific reasons they'd hold a service is incredibly granular.
It really paints a picture of their vulnerability. I mean, They had specific liturgical readings for times of no rain.
Wow.
For times of famine, for earthquakes.
Earthquakes. That feels very specific.
Very specific and terrified and plague.
It really grounds you in their reality. They weren't just thinking about high theology. They were trying to survive the elements.
Exactly. And they had specific commemorations for saints, which tells us who their heroes were. They mentioned St. Thomas, obviously, but also St. George and St. Cyran.
And that list is significant. Why?
Because it proves that by 1301, this community wasn't just a loose collection of believers. They had a highly structured, organized religious life. They were following the rite of the Church of Koke.
The Church of Koke. Break that down for us.
That was the Cathedral of Seleucia Ctesiphon. Historically, it was the seat of the Patriarch of the Church of the East. So this 14-year-old boy in India wasn't just making things up as he went along.
Right.
He was following a liturgy that connected him directly to the great spiritual centers in Persia, He was part of a system.
That connection is the perfect segue to the next part of this mystery. Because there's a mistake in the manuscript, a really specific historical error that young Zakaria makes, which somehow reveals more truth than if he'd gotten it right.
This is one of my favorite details in the entire study of these manuscripts. It's fantastic.
So Zakaria dedicates the book to the big boss, the Patriarch of the East. He names him as Maryabalaha V.
Right. Maryabalaha V.
But historians know for a fact that there was no Maryabalaha V. The guy in charge at that time was Maryabalaha III.
Exactly. He jumped the gun by 2 numbers.
So does this just mean Zakaria didn't know what he was talking about? Was he just out of the loop in his, tropical backwater?
Well, it raises a really important concept we call the tyranny of distance. The patriarchal seat was in Maraga, in modern-day Iran. For news to travel from there to Kerala via trade winds and overland routes took months, sometimes longer.
Right.
It wasn't uncommon for a patriarch to die and for the community in India to not find out until the successor was already seated.
So getting the number wrong, calling the 5th instead of the 3rd, that might just be a game of telephone gone wrong over thousands of miles?
Probably, but, and this is the key point, even though he got the number wrong, he got a much more specific, much more surprising detail right.
Which was?
He refers to the patriarch as the Turk.
The Turk.
Yeah.
That seems oddly specific for a religious title?
It's not a title, it's an ethnicity. And it is factually correct. Maryabalaha III was a monk of Mongol and Turkish descent. He was born near Beijing.
Wait, hold on. The head of the church in Persia was from Beijing.
Yes. He was an Ungud, a Turkic people allied with the Mongols. He was an outsider to the Persian establishment in so many ways.
And a 14-year-old boy in South India knew that.
That is the bombshell. Think about the geopolitics here. This is the era of the Pax Mongolica. The trade routes are open. You have a monk born near Beijing sitting on a throne in Iran, and a teenager in Kerala knows his ethnic background. It proves the East wasn't fragmented.
Wow.
There was a global supply chain of information.
That is wild. It just shatters the idea that these communities were isolated. They knew exactly who was sitting on the throne, even if they messed up the regnal number.
Precisely. And the manuscript also clarifies the local hierarchy. Zakaria refers to his local leader, Mar Jacob, and listen to the title he gives him. Metropolitan, Superintendent, and Governor of the Holy See of the Apostle Mar Thomas and of the whole Christian Church of India.
The Holy See of the Apostle Mar Thomas. That sounds like a declaration of independence almost, or at least a declaration of equal footing.
In a way, it is. It's a declaration of a distinct identity. It confirms the Indian Church saw itself as a specific entity, the See of St. Thomas. They acknowledged the patriarch in the East. They were part of that structure, but they viewed their own church as having a kind of quasi-patriarchal status. They were proud of their lineage.
So that's 1301, a confident, connected community plugged into the Mongol trade routes. But now, I want to jump forward in time. Let's fast forward 200 years.
To a much more turbulent time, the dawn of the colonial era.
Right. It's March 6th, 1510 AD. We are back in Cranganore, but the mood has probably changed. The Portuguese have arrived. Vasco da Gama landed in 1498. So things are getting complicated.
Very.
And we are looking at our second artifact, MS Vatican Syriac 17.
And the scribe this time isn't a nervous teenager apologizing for his handwriting. It is the bishop himself.
This is Mar Jacob, right? The Bishop of Hindu.
Yes, Mar Jacob. He arrived in India in 1504, so he had been there for about 6 years when he wrote this. He's a major historical figure because he lived right through that transition period when the Portuguese began to exert control over the St. Thomas Christians.
And he decides to sit down and copy. What exactly?
A massive volume. It's 480 folios. That's nearly 1,000 pages front and back. And it contains the complete New Testament in that same formal Estrangelo script.
The whole thing, Gospels, Acts, Epistles, everything.
Everything. It is the oldest surviving New Testament copied locally in India.
Why would a bishop do that? I mean, doesn't he have deacons like our friend Zakaria to do the grunt work for him?
Usually, yes. But the colophon tells us he copied it for his disciple, a deacon named Georgis. He calls him his trusty Levite. It feels like a mentor passing down knowledge to a student, a very personal labor of love.
There is a little detective detail in this one, too, isn't there? Something about a missing page.
Yes. There's a leaf missing between folio 477 and 478. And on folio 477, a word has been erased right in the middle of a line. Scholars think Mar Jacob himself might have made the erasure.
I love that. Even the bishop makes typos.
It reminds us that these are handmade objects. They have flaws, but there is one flaw, or what looks like a flaw, that is actually a sign of incredible integrity.
What do you mean?
It's in the text itself. It follows the East Syrian tradition very, very closely. For example, in the Gospel of John, the passage about the adulterous woman, the famous scene where Jesus says, "Let him who is without sin cast the first stone," is missing.
Missing. But that's one of the most famous stories in the Bible.
It is to us. But in the world of textual criticism, its absence is significant. That passage, the Pericope Adulterae, it isn't in the oldest versions of the Peshitta, nor in the oldest Greek manuscripts. It was a later addition in the Western tradition.
So by leaving it out, Mara Jacob wasn't being lazy. He was being a purist.
Exactly. In 1510, the Portuguese were right there. They were using the Latin Vulgate, which does include that story. There would have been pressure to conform to the Western way.
Sure.
But Mar Jacob held the line.
That is a subtle but powerful act of resistance. He's saying, this is our text, this is how we received it, and I'm not changing it just because you guys showed up.
It's a preservation of heritage, right in the face of a changing political landscape.
So we had the teenage deacon in 1301 and the stubborn bishop in 1510, both writing in Cranganore, both trying to preserve their world on parchment. But Cranganore today isn't the thriving metropolis it was. The humidity alone should have rotted these pages within a century.
Oh, absolutely. Paper in the tropics is usually a temporary affair. The climate just destroys everything.
Yet we aren't talking about these manuscripts because they were found in a clay jar in Kerala. We're talking about them because they are sitting in a climate-controlled vault in Rome. They are Vatican Syriac 22 and 17. How does a book get from a humid church in South India all the way to the Vatican Library?
That journey is a thriller in itself, and unfortunately it involves the very colonial interference Mar Jacob was wary of.
Right, because by the mid-16th century, the Portuguese are really interfering in local church affairs.
They are. If we look at the older book, the one by the 14-year-old, it has notes on the first page in Italian and Portuguese.
Graffiti.
More like administrative notes. It says, "The Epistles for the Sundays of St. Paul," in Chaldean characters. And the book was rebound in the 16th century, likely by the Portuguese.
So they took it.
It seems it passed through the hands of a Portuguese figure named Gela Fonseca, and the Gela Fonseca gave the book to a man named Mar Joseph Sulaca.
Who was he?
Mar Joseph Sulaca was a tragic, pivotal figure. He was the brother of a patriarch, and he was consecrated as Bishop of India in the late 1550s. But he ran into serious trouble with the Portuguese Inquisition and authorities in Goa. They accused him of heresy, largely because he refused to conform to all their Latin customs.
So he was persecuted by the very people he was supposed to be working with.
Exactly. He was forced to travel to Rome to defend himself, his faith, and his orthodoxy.
And he took the book with him.
He took the manuscript, the one written by young Zachariah, on his final journey. I mean, think about that. He's traveling to Rome to prove that his ancient church is legitimate. What better proof than an ancient manuscript written by his own people centuries earlier?
It's evidence. Look, we've been doing this for a long, long time.
Exactly. Margaret Joseph died in Rome in 1569. He never made it back to India, but the book stayed there.
Wow. So that manuscript traveled from a small church in Kerala, survived the humid tropical weather for centuries, got rebound by colonizers, and then was carried by a persecuted bishop all the way to Rome to serve as a witness for his people.
It really highlights how interconnected these worlds were. And there's one more detail about Cranganore that these manuscripts help us confirm. A later bishop, Francis Rawes, noted that Cranganore had 3 distinct churches.
3?
Yes, one for St. Thomas, one for St. Kuriakose, where our boy scribe sat, and one for Our Lady. These manuscripts are physical proof of that landscape. They tell us exactly where they were written.
So when we put this all together, what does it tell us? Why should you, listening right now, care about Zachariah and Mar Jacob today?
Well, think about the narrative we so often hear. There is often this idea that the real history of record-keeping in places like India starts with the colonial era. But here you have proof of a thriving, highly literate, deeply organized civilization.
That knew its place in the world.
Exactly. They had international relations with Persia and China. They had a distinct hierarchy. They had a rich liturgical life that accounted for everything from famine to the consecration of doctors. And they were producing high-quality literature. These manuscripts just dismantle the idea that this was an isolated or simple community.
It's proof of life.
It is. It's proof of a sophisticated identity that existed on its own terms.
You know, I keep thinking back to Zachariah, that kid. He's sitting there, maybe his hand is cramping, the light is dim. He finishes this massive work and then he writes that note. I'm sorry, I'm not good enough. My handwriting is bad.
He had no idea what he was creating. He couldn't see the value of his own existence in the timeline of history.
No idea. He thought he was just making a book for his local church. He didn't know that 700 years later, scholars in Rome and historians around the world would be looking at his pen strokes to prove the existence of his entire culture.
It is a powerful reminder of the endurance of the written word.
It just stops you in your tracks, doesn't it?
Hmm.
Zachariah looked at his work and saw flaws. He saw a cramped hand and a lack of experience. He apologized to the future. But 700 years later, that flawed notebook is the only reason we know he and his entire distinct culture existed at that moment. It's the primary source.
Absolutely. Your daily grind might just be the next millennium's history.
So that imperfect email you sent, that sketch in the margin of your notebook, that journal entry you think is boring, that might be the only proof of life that survives to explain your world to someone 700 years from now. Thanks for taking the deep dive with us.
Thank you.